transport in plants. Transportation. Hello, 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 hello. Mm, 1 आवर 12:30 तक 12:30 तक चलेगा 1 आवर सेशन बायोलॉजी में स्टडी अदर सब्जेक्ट्स लाइक इनऑर्गेनिक ऑर्गेनिक थेरेटिकल सब्जेक्ट चलेगा 11:45 already. Have you wondered what relations the top fall trees or what how matter how and why substances move from one cell to the other, whether all substances move in a similar way in the same direction, whether metabolic energy is required for moving substances. Plants need to move molecules over long distances much more than animals do. They also do not have a circulatory system in place. Water taken up by the roots has to reach all the parts of the plant up to the very tip of the growing stem. The photosynthesis or the food synthesized by the leaves have also to be moved to all parts, including the root tips embedded deep inside the soil. Movement across the short distances, say within the soil, across the membranes, and from cell to cell within the tissues has to take place. To understand some of the transport processes that take place in plants, one would have to recollect one's basic knowledge about the structure of the cell and the anatomy of the plant body. We also need to revisit our understanding of diffusion, besides gaining some knowledge about the chemical potential and the ions. When we talk about the movement of substances, we need to first define what kind of movement we are talking about and also what substances we are looking at. In flowering plants, the substances that we would need to be transported are water, mineral nutrients, organic nutrients, and the plant growth regulators. Over small distances, substances move by diffusion and by cytoplasmic streaming. Over small distances, substances move by diffusion and by cytoplasmic streaming, supplemented by the active transport. Supplemented by the active transport. Supplemented by the active transport. Transport over longer distances proceeds through the vascular system, the xylem and the phloem, and is called the translocation. Transport over longer distances proceeds through the xylem and the phloem and is called a translocation. Over small distances, substances move by diffusion and cytoplasmic streaming, supplemented by the active transport. Transport over longer distances occurs through xylem, that is vascular tissues, and this transport is called as translocation. An important aspect that needs to be considered is the direction of the transport. In rooted plants, the transport of the xylem, that is water and minerals, is essentially unidirectional. That is transport of water and minerals through xylem is unidirectional from roots to the stems. Organic and the mineral nutrients, however, undergo multi-directional transport. That is phloem direction multi transport होता है and xylem जो transport करता है water and minerals, that is essentially that is only and only unidirectional. Unidirectional. आपके चैनल पे न्यू हूँ, आप रोज लाइव आते हो क्या? टाइमिंग क्या है और नीट 2024 एस्पायरेंट्स के लिए स्ट्रेटजी बना दी I started the live sessions from कल से मैंने स्टार्ट किया था, परसों से बेसिकली. सो 1 घंटा रोज़ लाइव सेशन होगा, स्टडी विद मी सेशन. एक्चुअली योर स्ट्रेटजीज टू स्टडी 11th वो आएंगे आगे अगले वीडियोज़ में. अभी स्टडी सेशन है 1 आवर, मे बी 1 आवर 45 मिनट्स, अप्रॉक्स 45 मिनट्स तक लाइव सेशन होगा. कैन जॉइन व्हेन यू स्टार्ट. चैट बॉक्स में स्टार्ट लिख दो, पता चले कि कौन कौन ज्वाइन हुआ है. एंड वी कंसंट्रेटेड. थैंक यू सो मच. Synthesized in the photosynthetic leaves are exported to all the other parts of the plant, including storage organs. From the storage organs, they are re-exported. That is the transport through phloem. Organic material and nutrients are transported multidirectionally. From the storage organs, they are later exported. The mineral nutrients are taken up by the roots and transported upwards into the stem, leaves, and the growing regions. When any plant part undergoes senescence, that is, undergoes death, nutrients may be withdrawn from such regions and moved to the growing parts. When any plant part undergoes senescence, nutrients may be withdrawn from such regions and moved to the growing parts. Hormones or the plant growth regulators and the other chemical signals are also transported through, though in very small amounts, sometimes in strictly polarized or unidirectional manner, from where they are synthesized to the other parts. Here in flowering plants, there is a complex traffic of compounds, but probably very orderly, moving in different directions, each organ receiving some substances and giving out some others. Each organ receiving some organs, some substances, giving out others. From the stored organ, they are later exported. The mineral nutrients are taken up by the roots and transported upwards into the stem, leaves, and the growing parts. When the plant part undergoes senescence, nutrients may be withdrawn from such regions and moved to the growing parts. However, plant growth regulators and chemical signals are also transported, though in very chemical signals and plant growth regulators are also transported, and though in very small amounts, sometimes in a strictly polarized or unidirectional manner, from where they are synthesized to the other regions. Hence, in flower plants, there is a complex traffic of substances, some organs giving out some substances and some organs receiving out some others. Means of transport: diffusion. Movement of diffusion is passive, does not require any energy, and may be from one part of the cell to other, from cell to cell, or over short distances. From one part of the cell to other, from cell to cell, or over short distances, from the inner cellular space to the leaf of the leaf to the outside. The movement by diffusion is passive and may be from one part of the cell to other, from cell to cell, or over short distances, say from intercellular spaces of the leaf to the outside. Intercellular space of the leaf to the outside. No energy expenditure takes place. In diffusion, molecules move in a random fashion. There is not a particular direction. Molecules move in a random fashion. The net result being substances moving from the regions of high concentration to the regions of low concentration. Diffusion is a slow process and does not depend on the living system. Diffusion is a slow process and does not depend on the living system. Diffusion is obvious in gases and liquids. Diffusion is obvious in gases and liquids. Diffusion is obvious in gas and liquid. But diffusion in solids. Diffusion is obvious in gases and liquids. But diffusion in solids is more likely rather than of solids. Diffusion in solids. Diffusion is gases is obvious in gases and liquids. But diffusion in solids is more rather likely than of solids. Diffusion is a very important in plants because it is the only means for gaseous movement in the plant body. Diffusion is the only means of gaseous movement within the plant body. Diffusion is the only means of gaseous movement within the plant body. Diffusion rates are affected by the concentration gradient, permeability of the membrane, and the temperature and pressure. Concentration gradient, permeability of the membrane, temperature and pressure. Diffusion rates are affected by the concentration gradient, permeability of the membrane, temperature and pressure. Concentration gradient, permeability of the membrane, temperature and pressure. Permeability of the membrane, temperature and pressure. Movement by diffusion is passive and may be from one part of the cell to other, from cell to cell, or over short distances, say from intercellular distances from of the leaf to the outside. Intercellular distance of the leaf to the outside. No energy expenditure takes place in diffusion. Diffusion does not depend upon the living system. No energy expenditure takes place in diffusion. Diffusion does not depend upon the living system. लो भाई आप कौन से क्लास में हो और इंस्टीट्यूट का नाम रिप्लाई जस्ट डिस्टर्ब यू आई एम अ ड्रॉपर नीट 2022 की प्रिपरेशन कर रहा हूँ मैं एंड मैंने सेल्फ स्टडी की है इस साल पहले साल में श्रीनगर में पढ़ता था आई एम फ्रॉम कश्मीर बेसिकली just trying to do live sessions not so expert I mean movement of diffusion is passive movement by diffusion is passive and maybe from one part of the cell to other, from cell to cell or over short distances, say from intercellular space of the leaf to the outside. No energy expenditure takes place in diffusion. Molecules move in a random fashion, the net result being the substances moving from the regions of high concentration to the regions of low concentration. Diffusion is a slow process and is not dependent on the living system. Diffusion is obvious in gas and liquid, but diffusion in solids is more rather likely than diffusion of solids. Diffusion is very important. It is very important in plants since it is the only means of gaseous. Since it is the only means of gaseous transport. Since it is the only means of gaseous transport in the plants. Diffusion rates are affected by concentration gradient, permeability of the membrane, temperature, and pressure. Concentration gradient, permeability of the membrane, temperature, and pressure of the, very important factors affecting diffusion. Factors. Concentration gradient, permeability, temperature, and pressure are the factors which affect the diffusion process. Diffusion does not depend on the living system. It's based on facilitated diffusion. As pointed out earlier, a gradient must be already present for the diffusion to take place. The diffusion rate depends on the size of the substances. Obviously, smaller substances move faster. The diffusion of any substance across the membrane also depends upon the solubility of in lipids, the major constant of the cell membrane. Substances soluble in lipids diffuse through the membrane faster. Substances that are soluble in the lipids diffuse through the membrane faster. Substances soluble in lipids diffuse through the membrane faster. Substances that have a hydrophilic moiety find it difficult to pass through the membrane. Their molecules has to be facilitated. Substances that have a hydrophilic moiety finds it difficult to pass through the membrane. Difficult to pass through the membrane. Their movement has to be facilitated. Membrane proteins provide sites at which such molecules cross. Membrane proteins provide sites at which such molecules cross the membrane. They do not set up a concentration gradient. Membrane proteins do not set up a concentration gradient. A concentration gradient must be already present for the diffusion to occur. A concentration gradient must be already present for the diffusion to occur. A concentration gradient must be already present for the diffusion to occur. In facilitated diffusion, special proteins help to move substances across the membranes without expenditure of ATP. Facilitated diffusion cannot cause net transport of molecules from a region of low concentration to a region of high concentration because it requires energy. Transport rate reaches maximum when all the proteins transporters are being used, that is, facilitated diffusion reaches saturation when all the protein channels are used. Facilitated diffusion is very specific. It allows cell to select substances for uptake. It is sensitive to inhibitors which react with the protein side chains. The proteins form channels in the membrane for molecules to pass. The proteins form channels in the membrane for molecules to pass through. Some channels are always open. Others can be controlled. Some are large, allowing a variety of molecules to cross. The porins are the proteins that form large pores in the outer membrane of the plastids, mitochondria, and some bacteria, allowing molecules up to the size of small proteins, that is, large molecules, to pass through. The proteins that porins are the proteins that form large pores in the outer membrane of plastids, mitochondria, and some bacteria, allowing the molecules up to the size of small proteins, to pass through. Extracellular membrane aquaporin is made up of 8 different water channels are made up of 8 different types of eight different types of aquaporins. As pointed out earlier, a gradient must be already present for the diffusion to occur. The diffusion rate depends on the size of the molecule. It's obvious smaller substances will move faster. There's a movement also depends upon the solubility in the lipids. Those substances are soluble in lipids cross the membrane easily, because lipid is a major constituent of the cell membrane. Those molecules which have a hydrophilic moiety find it difficult to pass through the membrane. Their movement has to be facilitated with the help of the specific proteins present in the membrane. These proteins do not set up a concentration gradient. A concentration gradient must be already present for the diffusion to occur. These proteins cannot make the molecules to move from low concentration to high concentration because it would require energy. Facilitated diffusion is the movement of the molecules from a concentration of from high concentration to low concentration, using the proteins present in the membrane, because the substances have hydrophilic moiety and cannot pass through the membrane as such. Facilitated diffusion reaches saturation when all the membrane proteins are used. Facilitated diffusion virus is very specific. It allows cell to select substances for transport. It is sensitive to inhibitors which react with the protein side chains. The proteins form channels in the membranes of the molecules to pass through. Some channels are always open, where others can be controlled. Some channels are large and allowing a variety of molecules to pass through. Porins are the proteins that form large pores in the outer membranes of the plastids, mitochondria, and some bacteria, allowing the molecules up to the size of small proteins to pass through. Water channels are made up of 8 different types of aquaporins. Symport when the molecules move together in one direction. Antiport when the two molecules move in opposite direction. Symport, antiport. Uniport when a single molecule passes through them. Active transport. Active transport is the mode of substances. It is active. Active means it requires energy. Active transport. Active transport uses energy to transport and pump molecules against a concentration gradient. Active transport is carried out by specific membrane proteins. Hence, different proteins in the membrane play a major role in both active as well as passive transport. Pumps are proteins that use energy to carry substances across the cell membrane. These pumps can transport substances from a low concentration to a high concentration. Uphill transport rate reaches maximum when all the protein transporters are being used or are saturated. Like enzymes, the carrier protein is very specific. In what it carries across the membrane. These proteins are sensitive to inhibitors which react with the protein side chains. Active transport uses energy to pass through to carry the substances from a region of low concentration to a region of high concentration. Active transport uses specific proteins called as pumps which are present in the cell membrane. This transport is called as uphill transport. It also reaches saturation when all the pumps are being used. It is sensitive to inhibitors which react with the protein side chains. Comparison of different gives a comparison of the different transport mechanisms. Proteins in the membranes are responsible for the facilitated diffusion and active transport, hence show common characteristics of being highly selective. Selective both in passive transport as well as active transport has facilitated diffusion, simple diffusion. They are liable to saturate, respond to inhibitors, and are simple diffusion requires special no. High selective no. Transport saturation no. Uphill transport no, requires ATP energy. Requires specific membrane proteins, yes. High selective, yes. Transport saturation, yes. Uphill transport requires ATP energy. Plant water relations. Water is essential. Water is essential for all physiological activities of the plant and plays a very important role in all living organisms. It provides the medium in which most substances are dissolved. The protoplasm of the cells is nothing but water in which different molecules are dissolved and suspended. A watermelon has over 92% of water. Most herbaceous plants have only about 0 to 15% of its fresh weight as dry matter. Of course, distribution of the water within a plant varies. Woody parts have relatively very little water, while soft parts mostly contain more water. A seed may appear to be dry, but it still has water, otherwise it would not be alive and respiring. Water is essential for all physiological activities of the plant and plays a very important role in all living organisms. It provides a medium in which most substances are dissolved. The protoplasm of the cells is nothing but water, in which different molecules are dissolved and suspended. A watermelon has over 92% of water. Most herbaceous plants only 0 to 15%. Most herbaceous plants have only 0 to 15% of its fresh weight as dry matter. Of course, distribution of water in the middle varies. Woody plants have little amount of water. See the seed appears to be dry, but it also contains water, otherwise it would not be alive and respiring. Terrestrial plants take up huge amount of water daily, but most of it is lost. Most of the water that the terrestrial plants take up through the roots is lost to the air through evaporation from the leaves, that is transpiration. A mature corn plant absorbs about 3 liters of water in a day, while a mustard plant absorbs water equal to its own weight in 5 hours. Corn plants absorb 3 liters of water in a day, and a mustard plant absorbs water equal to its weight in 5 hours. Absorbs water equal to its weight in 5 hours. Absorbs water equal to its weight in 5 hours. Absorbs water equal to watermelons have 92% of water. Herbaceous plants have 10 to 15% of its use fresh weight has an emitting 10 to 15% के लिए trying to bag some water as an salt see this is dry mark some water present. Terrestrial plants take a huge amount of water daily, but most of it is lost to the transpiration. Most of the water is lost to the air through transpiration. A mature corn plant absorbs 3 liters of water in a day. A mature corn plant absorbs 3 liters of water in a day, while a mustard plant absorbs water equal to its weight in 5 hours. Because of this high demand for water, it is not surprising that water is often the limiting factor for plant growth and productivity in both agriculture and natural ecosystem. Because of the high demand for water, it is not surprising that water is often the limiting factor. Water is often the limiting factor for plant growth and productivity in both agricultural and natural ecosystems. For plant growth and productivity in both agricultural and natural ecosystems. Agricultural and natural ecosystems. To comprehend plant water relations and understanding of the certain standard terms in necessary water potential is a concept of phenomenal to understanding water movement, fluid potential, and the pressure potential are the two main components that determine water potential. Water molecules possess kinetic energy in liquid and gaseous form. They are in random motion that is both rapid and constant. The greater the concentration of the water in a system, the greater its kinetic energy or the water potential. Hence, it is obvious that the pure water will have the greatest water potential. If two systems containing water in contact in contact and the movement of water takes will result in the movement of water molecules from the system with high energy to the one with low energy. Thus, water from the system containing water at higher water potential to the one having lower water potential. This process of movement of substances down a gradient of free energy or water potential is called diffusion. Water potential is denoted by the Greek symbol psi and is expressed in pressure units such as pascals. By convention, the water potential of the pure water is at standard temperature, which is not under any pressure, is taken to be zero. If some solute is dissolved in pure water, the solution has few water molecules, and the concentration, or we can say that free energy of the water decreases, reducing its water potential, and hence all the solutions have water potential less than the pure water, that is less than zero, that is negative. Water potential of all solutions is negative. The magnitude of this hence all solutions have a lower water potential than pure water. The magnitude of this lowering due to dissolution of the solute, lowering of water potential due to dissolution of solute, is called the solute potential. Solute potential is always negative. The more the solute molecules, the more the solute molecules, the lower is the solute potential. The more the solute molecules, the lower is the solute potential, or we can say more negative is the solute potential. For a solution at atmospheric pressure, water potential equal to solute potential. Water equal to solute potential. Water potential equal to solute potential. If a pressure greater than atmospheric pressure is applied to pure water or a solution, its water potential increases. If pressure, hence when we apply pressure to a water, it moves because its water potential increases. Because as we know that water moves from a state of high water potential to a state of lower water potential. If we apply pressure to a pure water or a solution, its water potential increases and it moves to the other state having lower water potential than it. Anything else in our body where pressure is built up? Pressure can be built up in a plant system when water enters the plant due to diffusion, causing pressure built up against the cell, or it makes the cell turgid. If a pressure greater than the atmospheric pressure is applied to pure water or a solution, its water potential increases. It is equivalent to pumping water from place to another. Water molecules possess kinetic energy in liquid and gaseous form. They are in random motion that is both rapid and constant. The greater the concentration of the water, the greater is the kinetic energy, the greater is the free energy, or we can say the greater is the water potential. Higher energy to one lower energy. This water will move from the system containing water at high water potential to a system at low water potential. The process of movement of substances down a gradient of free energy is called diffusion. Down a gradient of free energy is called diffusion. Water potential is denoted by the Greek symbol psi or and is expressed in pressure units such as Pascal. By convention, the water potential of pure water at standard temperature, which is not under any pressure, is taken to be zero. If some solute is dissolved in pure water, the solution has fewer free water molecules. The solution has fewer free water molecules, and the concentration, or we can say free energy of the water, concentration of the water decreases, reducing its water. Hence, all solutions have lower water potential than the pure water. The magnitude of this lowering, due to dissolution of the solute is called the solute potential. Solute potential, more the solute molecules, more negative is the solute potential, lower is the solute potential. More the solute molecules, lower is the solute potential, For a solution at atmospheric pressure, water potential is equal to solute. For the solution at atmospheric pressure, water potential is equal to solute potential. When a pressure greater than atmospheric pressure is applied on a solution, its water potential increases. It is equivalent to the pumping. It is equivalent to pumping the water from a water at high potential to water at low potential. The water at high potential to a state of low potential. To a state of low potential. If some solid pure water solution has fewer free water molecules and the concentration of free energy of the water decreases, reducing its water potential. Hence, all solutions have lower water potential than pure water. The magnitude of the lowering due to dissolution of the solute is called the solute potential. Is always negative. The more the solute molecules, more negative the solute potential, less the solute potential at atmospheric pressure. The solute potential is equal to water potential. Pressure greater than the atmospheric pressure is applied to water or solution. Its water potential increases. It's equivalent to pumping water molecules from high water potential to a lower water potential.